Hello guys, welcome to another session. In this session, we are going to discuss about higher order component. So let's start our discussion. Higher order component is one of the design pattern of React. With the help of this, we can design the reusable component. For example, if you look into this, then you will find that we are having a component 1 and component 2, and both are doing the same thing, but their trigger point is different. For example, if you are working with a client and they are looking for a button, whenever they will click on the button, then it will increment the value on the button. So initially you design that, and later point of time they want the same functionality, but they want this time on the hover of a mouse on a H1 tag. So that means on hover it will increment the value on the H1 element whenever mouse get hover. In both the requirement you found that the increment task is common irrespective of from where it is get triggered. This is one of the simplest example which I am quoting over here because I wanted to make you understand that what actually higher order component technique offers us. So to understand it better, let's jump into the Visual Studio Code and design the whole scenario within code. So we are into the Visual Studio Code. The first step I am going to do is that I am going to create a folder called click counter, and within that I am going to create a file called click counter.js, and this is going to contain a class component. For that I am going to write RCE, and this snippet will give me the boilerplate code. And over here I will do two things. First, I am going to introduce a constructor which will contain a count state, and let's write it, and this is going to initialize 0. And another, I am going to introduce a increment method. So tell that increment counter, this is going to be an arrow function, and this contains the increment logic where I am going to change the set state, and I am going to take the previous state and then I will manipulate that, and over here I will specify the block over here, and that will return the count by incrementing it 1. So this we will get from the prev state dot count plus 1. Now here I will introduce a button. So let me introduce a button over here, and over here I will specify button, and that button will contain on click. So on click, this will call the method which we have created, increment counter, close it, and over here we will specify some level, and this will print the this dot 8 dot count and times. So whenever this button gets clicked, it will increment the counter. So let's look into the output. So what output we will get, but make sure that you are adding this app over here. So let's add it, and we are going to tell that click counter, and the references get incorporated within the file with the help of auto import extension. And over here make sure that you are closing it, save it. Let's look into the output now, and over here you will find the button, and if you click on this button then it will increment it those number of time. How many times you will click, this value gets incremented. So now let's proceed further. So now on the same aspect, our client wants a hover counter so that whenever the mouse gets hover, the value gets incremented. So let's design that. As usual, I'm going to create a folder hover counter, and this is going to contain a file with the same name, hovercounter.js, and this is also going to be a class component. So with the snippet RCE, I am going to generate the boilerplate code, and over here again I am going to introduce constructor. So let's write constructor, and this contain a count 0, and now I am going to introduce the same. Now this will also contain the increment counter. So let me copy it to save the time. So let's copy this and put it over here. So now we have added the function over here. So the next step is we will add the H1 tag over here, and this will contain a method on mouse over, and whenever mouse get over, so it will call this dot increment counter, and over here we will tell that hover and specify the state value over here, this dot 8 dot count, and this is going to contain times also. Save it. Now let's go to app.js to add this component. Come here and tell that hover counter, and it is get added over here. So now let's jump into the browser to see the output, and over here you will find that we have introduced a hover functionality with increment. Same is the case with this one. Now the common thing is over here is we are having a increment method or say increment functionality which is repeated, and this will violate the dry principle. There is something called dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. Whenever we write some enterprise application, then make sure that you will write the code in a more reusable way. So to make it reusable, what I am going to do, I am going to introduce the higher order component concept, and we will look into how to design higher order component so that we can achieve the reusability. So let's jump into the Visual Studio Code. So to design the reusable code with the help of higher order component, so we need to design the higher order component. So how we will design it? We are going to create a folder called counter functionality, and this is going to contain a reusable code which will contain the logic of counter functionality, that is increment, and I will tell that counter functionality.js. So now we have to create an arrow function. I am going to tell that const, and I will tell that update counter functionality, and this will takes the input, that I will tell that input component, and when it will receives the input component, and now within that I am going to create the class component. So RCE into take this one and put it at top as it is an import statement, and then we will design the same functionality what we have designed for our earlier two components, click counter and the hover counter. So the first step, we need to introduce the constructor with the help of rconst snippet, and over here we will keep the counter count value, and now we will have the increment counter. Let's copy that one. So let's copy it, and over here paste the functionality, and this is going to be input component. I spelled it wrong. Input component, grab it, and over here I will put the input component, and I will tell that count equal to, and this will contain this dot state dot count, and the functionality I am going to have over here is the increment counter, and what it will do, it will call the method this dot increment counter, and save it, and make sure that you are closing this one. Now save it. Now we have added the functionality. One mistake I did it over here is the name of file is wrong. It is going to be counter functionality, and over here you should make sure that that should also be corrected. Copy this one and paste it over here. So save it. Now we have done with the higher order component. So how I am going to use this one? So now the next step, to use it we need to go into the click counter as well as hover counter over here, and here we need to remove all these things. So let's remove it. Now to use the updated counter functionality, now the next step, we need to wrap the click counter within the counter functionality. So we were using the update counter functionality. So let me write it, update counter functionality, and this is being wrapped over here. So cut this one and paste it over here. So this is one step. Another step, we need to change it, this prop. Earlier it was this dot increment counter. This time we just need to specify that this dot props dot increment counter, and over here instead of a state we will mention props. Save it. We have done for click counter. Same we can repeat for hover counter. So copy this one, and over here we will go first. Let me delete the constructor and the functionality, and over here update functionality, and here we need to close this one. Now again over here we need to specify props dot increment counter, and over here props dot count. Save it. Now let's look into the output. So now we will find that we got an error. So we got error because of named export. So let me remove that. So make sure that you are not using the named export in the higher order component. So let's delete this one, save it. Now let's jump into the browser to see the output, and we will see that we got the same kind of output which we were achieving through two different implementation of the same thing, that is increment counter. But with the help of higher order component, we designed the reusable component which we can use anywhere. So let's proceed further. So now we understand that how to design higher order component and how we can use this higher order component in React. And this is what I wanted to demonstrate you in this session. See you in the next session. Till then, bye bye, take care.